Long before the rise of modern empires, the Mesopotamian landscape was dominated by sprawling settlements built entirely of clay and stone. Here, human survival was deeply tied to the physical monuments they could construct with their own hands. This reliance on the physical extended into their cultural life and spirituality. An entire economy thrived on the creation of carved wooden statues and stone figures, objects that required human labor to take shape, yet were revered as deities. Yet within this collective devotion, a single observer stood entirely apart. This was the young Prophet Ibrahim. He watched his people gather around these statues, recognizing a glaring contradiction. They were bowing to objects they had just finished carving. They believed the vast, unpredictable forces of the universe were somehow controlled by lifeless materials formed by their own chisels. The spiritual environment of this era was defined by a deliberate choice, prioritizing the worship of physical objects over the search for their origin. It was the elevation of the handiwork of man above the architect of the universe. This intellectual pursuit brought Ibrahim directly into the workspace of his father, Azar, an idol maker. He was living at the very source of the society's illusion. Here, the contrast was sharp. Ibrahim possessed a living, breathing intellect capable of deep reasoning. The statues surrounding him had faces, yet they remained silent, immobile, and entirely dependent on his father's tools. Looking at these blocks of wood and stone, Ibrahim finally asked his father a piercing question. "Do you take these idols as gods?" Azar's defense relied entirely on the weight of inheritance, the argument that because their ancestors had worshipped these stones, they were divine. There was no logical explanation for the statue's lack of life or power. There was only the pressure of tradition. Seeing that even his father could offer no proof beyond ancestral habit, Ibrahim's deduction was final. He observed his father and his people and declared that he saw them in clear error. Reaching the ultimate truth requires breaking the powerful psychological inertia of inherited tradition. For Ibrahim, the search had officially begun. Stepping out of his father's workshop, Ibrahim carried his inquiry into the grand public temples and bustling marketplaces where his society's religious system operated. He applied rigorous empirical logic to the idols standing in these squares. He observed that they could not speak, could not hear the prayers directed at them, and could not even defend themselves if a piece of their stone chipped away. If these earthly objects were utterly powerless, a deeper question emerged. Who actually created the human beings standing before them? Who possesses the true power to dictate the rain, the seasons, and the heavens? He brought this argument directly to his people, demanding they explain the nature of the statues they were so desperately devoted to. He asked them to prove any real benefit or harm these objects could cause. With the physical objects of the earth proven dependent and powerless, the investigation had to pivot. The search for ultimate authority now required looking upward. A moment of wonder. Leaving the stone ruins behind, Ibrahim turned his attention to the vast expanse of the night sky, initiating the celestial phase of his inquiry. He first observed the stars. To a human mind searching for a higher power, these distant, untouchable lights burning in the darkness presented a compelling hypothesis for ultimate control. But as the night progressed, a fatal logical flaw revealed itself. The stars faded. They vanished with the approaching dawn, completely violating the requirement of an eternal, ever-present creator. His inquiry then moved to the rising moon. It was larger, casting a commanding silver glow over the desert, representing a seemingly dominant force that cut through the darkness of night. Yet, just like the stars, the moon eventually followed a downward trajectory, sinking beneath the horizon. Ibrahim rejected it, determining that anything that vanishes cannot be a god. Finally, he evaluated the sun. It was the largest and brightest celestial body, dictating the very rhythm of life, heat, and agriculture on Earth. But as the day ended, the bright sun, too, inevitably set beneath the horizon. Through this sequence, Ibrahim deduced a universal law: whatever moves, changes, or sets, is bound by the rules of time. Therefore, it cannot be the creator of time itself. Ibrahim returned with a unified understanding of the universe, the deduction that a single unseen originator governed every rising and setting celestial body. He presented his final declaration, turning his face entirely away from all physical candidates, directing his worship strictly to the unseen originator of the heavens and the earth. This was the logic of pure monotheism. It was the absolute rejection of assigning partners, fragments, or temporary forces to the sovereignty of the true creator. Ibrahim did not use physical force to spread this realization. He utilized reason, persistent questions, and open dialogue to awaken his people from their intellectual slumber. The response was swift and harsh. Rather than engaging with his arguments, the society reacted with deep collective anger and defensive confusion. When a civilization's power and identity are built entirely on an illogical tradition, pure logic is perceived as an existential threat. The conflict was heavily asymmetrical. On one side stood an entrenched, wealthy civilization. On the other stood one isolated young man, with no army, no status, and no followers. He relied on a conviction built from observation and deduction, a foundation that remained steady even as the city turned against him. Unable to defeat him in open debate, the society abandoned their arguments. They began preparing a massive, violent physical trial, a raging fire designed to silence his voice forever. True faith is not something inherited blindly. It is discovered through rigorous reason, and when the flames are lit, it is maintained with ultimate courage.